Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us and our webinar around the Longleaf Commitment Grant. We will be starting at 10 o'clock. We are just awaiting everybody to be able to enter the room. We have had such great engagement and excitement around this grant. We've had over 500 counselors and educators and community colleges across the state wanting to learn more. So we will get started at 10 a.m. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I know that there are individuals that are joining us today that was originally scheduled for supporting students in navigating trauma, grief, and stress, and the impact on the college-going process. Today, we have actually needed to refocus our attentions today to the Longleaf Commitment Grant. This is an exciting opportunity for us to share additional information about this new opportunity. Unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, we needed to reschedule supporting students in navigating trauma, grief, and stress. We do plan to share out a recording and reschedule for another opportunity potentially later on in the fall. But today we are going to use the opportunity, a timely opportunity, to be able to share in the Longleaf Commitment Grant. We are still kind of giving a couple of minutes to allow the more than 500 individuals who have registered for this webinar to join. We will be starting the webinar in the next couple of minutes. Thank you all again for joining. All right, in the interest of time, we are going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Charbonneau. I am the Director of Advocacy and Engagement for My Future NC. We are really excited today to have everybody be able to join us with exciting news about the Longleaf Commitment Grant that the Governor of North Carolina had just announced on Monday. Just from a logistics standpoint, Lashika Hester is serving as our technical support today, and a big thank you to both she and Melissa Caperton, who is our Director of Regional Impact, who is joining us and assisting us in helping to get information out to you and to help us to run this webinar smoothly. If you have any challenges, please go ahead and send in the chat any challenges from email, or her telephone number is also listed here. Wanted to remind everybody today that because we have over 500 individuals that are joining us, we will continue to have everybody on mute. But if you do have any questions at any time throughout the webinar, please go ahead and use the chat line or the Q&A line. We will be hearing from our speakers, and then shortly after, go ahead and introduce an opportunity to share in those questions and have those answered. I wanted to just go ahead and list up some of the great work that everybody has been doing. North Carolina, as you know, has set an attainment goal of 2 million North Carolinians between the ages of 25 and 44, holding a high degree post-secondary credential or degree by 2030. As you know, My Future NC has been working at the state and local level to support initiatives, policies, and practices that will really help to move the needle in reaching that goal. FAFSA has been an incredible opportunity and priority, as we know that it's a critical step in the college-going process for our students. Not only are students who complete the FAFSA more likely to enroll and complete college, it's a required step for students to understand their eligibility for federal, state, and most institutional aid opportunities. And for our students from low-income families, completing the FAFSA is really the first step in making college financially within reach. Many of you are joining us today through the First in FAFSA initiative. I want to thank all of our counselors out there that have joined us today. The work that you have really been doing to help support students and families in the college going process is admirable, and we appreciate your commitment and dedication. For those of you that are new that are joining us today, My Future NC has really helped to kick off an overall collaborative to really support in helping our practitioners, our community members, and others that are supporting our students and families in the college going process with a suite of FAFSA tools, including the First in FAFSA Tracker, the First in FAFSA Challenge, as well as a powerful combination of those tools with Finish the FAFSA through the CFNC Professional Center report. You can check out all of that information on ncfirstinfafsa.com. I just wanted, before we get into the next set of our speakers, wanted to share in just celebrating the growth that we have seen in just a really unprecedented year. We have been monitoring FAFSA completion rates at the state level since launching in January, and currently we are at 49.4% of our FAFSA completion rate for the class of 2021. And since January, FAFSA completion has grown by 14.6 percentage points. When comparing those completion rates to this time last year, we are down 5.7%, but in January, that gap was over 9%. So the year-over-year completion gap is continuing to shrink, and that's in thanks to many of your efforts. Likewise, the gaps have continued to shrink in North Carolina's Title I eligible schools and what NCAN calls high minority schools. Our North Carolina high schools who serve the student body that is at least 40% Black or Hispanic Latino students or our rural students. And that with that, I want to go ahead and introduce our next group of speakers. These individuals are really helping to lift up the Longleaf Commitment Grant. Jeff Coltrane, who is joining us with Governor Cooper's administration as the Senior Education Advisor since June of 2017. Previously, Jeff served as the Director of Institutional Research and Strategic Initiatives at the NC School of Science and Mathematics, the Director of Program and Policy at the Hunt Institute, and the Research and Communications Director at the NC New Schools Project. Jeff started his career as an elementary teacher in Durham, North Carolina, and was a North Carolina Teaching Fellow. Andy McCracken is also joining us today. He is the policy analyst at the North Carolina Pandemic Recovery Office. Prior to that, Andy served as the co-founder and executive director of the National Post-Secondary Policy nonprofit for 9 years, and most recently did research and program consulting for the NC-based education policy organizations. And last but not least, we've got Dr. James, who we call JW Kelly, and he is the Associate Vice President of Student Services for the North Carolina College System. Prior to that, Dr. Kelly was the Vice President of Student Services at Randolph Community College and spent several years at Fayetteville Technical Community College. I want to thank you all for joining us today, and it's just really thrilling to have this opportunity to help better serve our students and support them in really obtaining education after high school. Jeff?
Thanks so much, Chris, and good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today for this discussion and very exciting news about the Longleaf Commitment program grant that the governor announced on Monday. And I also want to thank My Future NC for hosting us today and for really being such great partners in helping get this word out. And then I want to congratulate all of you out there for the great work that you're doing on FAFSA completion. The governor has long recognized, as have many of you, the importance of the FAFSA and students completing the FAFSA to making sure that they're able to access a post-secondary education affordably and as free as practicable, as our state constitution says. And obviously the FAFSA was the first step in that. And we know there's so many of our students out there that may think that they can't afford to go to college. or on to post-secondary training, and that FAFSA is the first step in helping them to see what aid is actually available to them. And that's what leads us to our discussion today. On Monday, the governor announced how he is allocating the remaining $51 million in governor's emergency education relief funds, which were part of the Federal CARES Act that was passed last spring, and then what's called the CARISA, or the Coronavirus Relief Act, that was passed in December. The state has received about $137 million total from both of those GEAR funds, and the governor had allocated about $86 million in last fall that was targeted towards K-12 schools, particularly helping school districts to hire more nurses, counselors, social workers, and psychologists, and then to provide academic support to students who were at risk or struggling during the pandemic, as well as some emergency financial aid to our systems of higher education to help support students who were at risk of not being able to complete their degree or not being able to pay for their tuition. And then about $15 million that went to our community colleges to help students who were pursuing a short-term workforce credential. Those students were not eligible for any financial aid through the Federal COVID Relief Act, and often are not eligible for financial aid through state or other federal resources. And so those funds were to help those students who were not pursuing an associate's degree, but something, a credential that is just below that associate's degree level, and really are helping them to get the skills to be job ready. And so far we've seen over 5,200 students that have utilized those funds to actually pursue that short-term workforce training program. The remaining funds that the governor announced on Monday, the $51 million, are really targeted at helping to ensure our students who are pursuing post-secondary education are able to do so affordably, but also to make it all the way to completion, as we know that attainment is critical as we continue to recover from the pandemic, but also to grow our state's economy and to eventually reach the goal of 2 million by 2030 that my future NC has been helping us with. You can go on to the next slide. So the goals that the governor wanted to pursue as part of his announcement was really to improve post-secondary access and completion for students who have been most impacted by the pandemic, reduce barriers to student success while they're pursuing those degrees or credentials, and then accelerate many of our equity-focused programs and data resources that are going to help those students who have been most impacted recover from the pandemic, but also to give us the information that we need so that we can better target state level and local policies and resources to help support those students. And specific to the Longleaf Commitment Program, we know that this year's high school graduates, the class of 2021, have unfortunately, they've had a disrupted junior and senior year because of the pandemic. Many of them maybe have been learning remotely at home or have been in a hybrid situation where they've only been able to be in person for a portion of the year. While we've got a lot of investments coming into our K-12 system to help support students recover any possible learning that they may have missed last year, these students are not. They're going to graduate. They will not be in the K-12 system anymore. And so the governor really wanted to make sure that these students are able to keep going and continue their education after high school to earn those degrees or credentials. And so that's really the focus of the Longleaf Commitment Program. It's focusing on those students and helping them to be successful in their post-secondary pursuits. You can go on to the next slide. And so the governor, as part of his GEAR announcement, 31 of the $51 million is focused on this Longleaf Commitment Program that we're going to discuss today. About 25 million of those funds are for direct grants and aid to students to pursue their degree at the community college level. About 6,000 of that is in matching grants to our community colleges to hire student success coaches, advisors, or other student support efforts to help those students be successful once they enroll and are working on their degree. About 12.5 million of the 51 million is actually in what the governor's calling Longleaf Reconnect. And these are funds to each of our 3 post-secondary systems, so the community college system, the UNC system, and our independent colleges and universities, to help adult learners who maybe have stopped out or have dropped out of college and need a little bit extra help to get back in to the higher education, or students who maybe have had to stop out because of financial difficulties or other reasons during the pandemic. And so that Longleaf Reconnect, or we're calling it Longleaf Complete as well, is to help get those students back in and then on their way to completion. Another $5 million is focused on mental health needs at our post-secondary institutions. This is going to be a grant to UNC, to the UNC system, and then they're going to help to coordinate efforts across all 3 of our sectors to support student mental health. And then the remaining funds are on a couple of key equity-focused initiatives that have been important both for the governor and for our state over the last several years. Jobs for NC's Graduates is a program that's focused on at-risk high school juniors and seniors to help get them into to make sure they complete high school, into a workforce training program, and then make sure that they graduate ready for a job in the workforce. $750,000 is focused on creating an education recovery dashboard that will help us keep track of how our students are doing in recovering from the pandemic. $650,000 is focused on digital literacy initiatives at our Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. And then $173,000 is focused on our UNC system high school student population. The School of Science and Math and the School of the Arts both serve a significant amount of high school students. And because those are university-based institutions, they're not eligible for any of the federal COVID relief dollars. So these funds help to support those students during this pandemic recovery time. But our focus for today is really on the governor's Longleaf Commitment program. And I'm excited to turn it over now to my colleague, Andy McCracken from the North Carolina Pandemic Recovery Office to walk us through some of the specifics about this program. Andy?
Thanks, Jeff. And thanks everyone for spending the morning with us to talk through this exciting program. So I'll hit some of the sort of top pieces, some of the main components of the program, and then JW will get into more details on how students can apply, where the importance of your work ties into some of the outreach for the program. So Longleaf Commitment guarantees a minimum of $2,800 in grants, not loans, but grants that build off of Pell, the community college grant, and education lottery scholarship. And that amount is targeted to cover tuition and most fees, if not all fees, at any of the state's community colleges. All students will receive a minimum of $700 grant. So in some similarly structured programs in other states, someone who receives a Pell Grant is already who receives maximum Pell or even partial Pell will likely receive enough support through Pell to cover tuition and fees, and would often not receive support through this kind of modeled program. But we are ensuring that everyone receives some funding, recognizing the importance of continuing some support up to full cost of attendance. With student eligibility, and I know there's some questions in on this, and we'll address questions after we finish up the presentation. But on student eligibility, this is open to anyone graduating from a North Carolina high school this year and has a expected family contribution of up to $15,000 will receive at least that minimum $700 grant. The maximum grant ends at $12,000 EFC and phases out until $15,000. So as you all know, expected family contribution is hard to exactly pinpoint to specific family incomes, but the $12,000 figure and $15,000 figure respectively for EFC equates to roughly $90,000 AGI and $100,000 AGI for families with 2 children. So certainly hoping to capture a large portion of this year's graduating class. In order to participate in the program, students simply need to apply for community college starting for fall enrollment this year, and to submit their FAFSA. They'll be automatically considered for the program. So understanding at this point in the calendar, many students may have already taken those steps. They did not miss out on this program. They will automatically have their financial aid adjusted to reflect their eligibility for Longleaf Commitment. And then in addition to the student aid, the governor recognizes the importance of ensuring that students have the support systems that they need to be successful once they are enrolled and participating in classes, and hopefully persisting through completion. And so in addition to the student aid portion of this, the governor is directing about $6 million to the community college system to use as matching funds to expand student support services such as success coaches, mentoring, academic advisors at our community colleges across the state. Let me jump to the next slide. So this chart will give you a sense of how the student aid breaks down based on different potential characteristics of student finances. So you see with student A with a $0 with 0 EFC, they qualify for maximum Pell. They will, which is obviously above that $2,800 target, but they will receive a $700 grant from Longleaf. Student B has a little bit higher EFC that gets them into the range that's eligible for the community college grant and education lottery scholarship. Similarly, those two alone get over the $2,800 threshold, but there's the minimum $700 grant. And you can see up to sort of past where the state and federal aid phases out, where Longleaf Commitment then picks up that gap up to $2,800. And I should note that these figures are based on full-time enrollment. Part-time students are eligible to participate and benefit from Longleaf Commitment. The actual award amounts will be prorated based on their enrollment intensity. So if someone's enrolled half-time, the minimum and maximum grants would be $350 up to $1,400 per year. So just the half rate, and so that'll match up to what the actual costs are for tuition and fees. Next slide. That's it for me. So again, we will answer some questions on student eligibility and process, but with that, I'll hand it over to JW.
All right, thank you, Andy. And I want to go ahead and thank Andy and his entire team and for all the work that they've done to help make this become a reality. Also want to thank the governor and his office and his team for having a great partnership with the community college system and remembering us and providing this funding. Another couple of people I want to make sure I thank, and that is the State Education Assistance Authority. They are our conduit and assist us tremendously, along with the College Foundation Incorporated, to make sure that we are able to get the funds from the state level down to the community colleges. And so I want to thank them, and of course, my future NC today for helping with this program. I also want to take a moment and thank all the counselors and the high school personnel and public education workers that may be on the line today. We have a long-standing partnership at the local community college level to work locally with those high school leaders and teachers and counselors And I just want to thank you for that partnership and your willingness to attend today. Because without that partnership, we would not be able to, be able to make this scholarship grant a reality. And so thank you very much for your work with the students and with the parents and in your communities and your partnership with your local community college. So on this slide right here, I wanted to make sure that you were aware of where the landing page was and where we will continue to add resources for both students and for parents, and then also for any other peoples in the community and any of our other stakeholders. So if you just go to our main page there, which you can see at the top of the slide, you can either click the image where it talks about the Longleaf Commitment Grant, or you can put into the search box Longleaf Commitment and hit enter, and it'll take you to the landing page that has more information about the procedures and about the grant. Next slide, please. And so one of the things that you will see on that landing page is a little more detail about the eligibility requirements for the community college grant. And I know we have a couple of questions about that already, and I'll just highlight a few things here. And that is that going through the RDS and meeting the requirements as a resident for tuition purposes is critical. Being a North Carolina high school graduate for 2021 is critical. And then also we have many students that we share through our innovative high school programs. And those students are also eligible. So even if they have some CCP credit or innovative high school credit at their local community college, once they graduate high school, they are still eligible for this grant. Of course, this is for our curriculum college credit programs, and you have to enroll in at least 6 semester hours of credit. We've already talked about the importance of completing the FAFSA. However, you also need to renew that FAFSA the next year, especially for our first generation students. Sometimes they forget that the FAFSA is something that you have to do every year, that you must do annually. So I wanted to make sure I highlighted those eligibility requirements. Go to the next slide, please. So the process is we're doing our best to keep that very simple from the student experience. We believe that it is critical for the student to go ahead and submit the application to the community college of their choice. That is their admissions application, because then that begins the communication plan at that local community college, and that local community college can become the main contact to serve that student and make sure they meet the enrollment process and the admissions process to become a student at that local community college. They also need to make sure that they get their FAFSA done, as we've said several times. However, both of those are the critical pieces to the student experience when it comes to this process. If they happen to do the FAFSA before their application, that's fine. It won't mess up anything. However, as soon as they get the application done, it's wonderful, because then they can have that communication and continue to build that relationship with their local community college. I want to emphasize that there is not a grant application. Because of our great partnership with CFI and SEAA, some of the back office operational is that we have an interface with the community college grant system, and that system will allow all eligible students to receive the funds through SEAA without having to take an extra step. So that is critical to the process, not just for the student experience, but also for the financial aid offices across the state. So there's not an additional grant application. We just need them to choose their college, submit their admissions application, and get that FAFSA done. Next slide, please. So we've begun some marketing. One is there's a flyer that will be sent out to all participants today. And then, as you've seen, I've given you a little bit of an overview of the webpage that's available on the North Carolina Community College System website. That webpage also has a place for some helpful hints or links that will help them choose a college, choose a career, those type of things, and links to some of our partners. It also has a place where students and parents can submit questions. We hope to use that as a beginning of a frequently asked question page, and we'll hopefully get that up in the next couple of weeks. So that'll be another source there for that. We have begun conversations with a marketing vendor to help us get marketing templates and images available, especially for social media and digital marketing. Hopefully we'll have that available in the upcoming weeks. However, at this point, the most critical piece in our marketing is that we need you. You are the people that have the direct contact with students, you have the direct contact with parents, and we need you to encourage them and to seize this opportunity to pursue their educational career at a local community college and to take avail of this Longleaf Commitment grant. We also covet your ideas. So please share your ideas. Don't hesitate to email me if you have some ideas about marketing or if you have questions. Please don't hesitate to submit those questions to help us make a great FAQ so that way we can better serve our students. Because I would rather to have those questions stump me today so that way we can remedy the answer and be ready for our students in July and August. So we really, really need your help, and we appreciate your commitment to serve students. Next slide. So that's all I have for you today, and I think we're pausing now, and I turn it over to Chris.
Great. Thank you so much. You guys have provided such great information, and I think there's just been a lot of excitement and engagement on our chat line and our Q&A, so let's just get to it. A lot of the questions stem from eligibility, and one of the first questions that came up was certainly, we've got students that came from a class of 2020. Are they eligible for this?
Thanks, Chris. And as of now, this program is just focused on the class of 2021. So students who are graduating from high school right now. That is the focus based on the amount of funding that's available. If that changes in the future, we'll definitely let you know. But as of right now, the focus is on the class of 2021.
Great. And as a follow-up question, we also have quite a few questions about any resources that will be available for undocumented students as they're not eligible to submit a FAFSA. Can you talk a little bit more about how we might serve or how this is serving either DACA students or those with other immigration status?
Absolutely. And I'm happy to start, but JW and Andy, feel free to jump in as well. This program is available to students based on residency status. So students who are DACA or undocumented, or some students who have certain visas while they're studying here are not eligible under residency status. So it's modeled after our current community college grant, which also is not available to those students. So currently, if you're a DACA student or undocumented, you're not eligible, as well as those other visas that are part of the community college grant program. Again, if that changes, we'll let you know. However, the higher education emergency relief funds, the HERE funds that are part of the American Rescue Plan, are available now to DACA students. So that is one resource that I would encourage you to look at when those funds become available to our community colleges, that they are a resource that is available to students, to current DACA students. Andy, JW, anything else you would add there?
I think the only thing I would add is with those new HERF funds that I know that the leadership at the system office and the President's Association are in conversations already about best practices on how to use those funds at the local college level. I'm not privy to all of those conversations, but I know that they are having those conversations.
The next question was, are North Carolina homeschooled students who were dually enrolled in the community college system eligible for funding?
So any student who's graduating from high school this year, homeschooled, public school, and private school, are eligible for this grant. And as JW mentioned earlier, students who have been part of the CCP program or participated in early college or middle college are also eligible, even though they have taken or been enrolled in our community colleges. So yes, any homeschool, public school, or private school student who's currently graduating is eligible.
Great.
And Jeff, I'd like to add to that, sorry, Chris, is that also our early graduates. So if you had a December or January graduate for this academic year, those students are eligible as well.
So this might apply to this, but does the funding apply to community college summer of 2021 semester, which started in May?
No. So it'll start for fall enrollment, and as much as I think we had endeavored to open up for this summer, it just, because this is a new program, that there's a bit of technical components that are going to take some time to make sure are in place. So the aid will start for fall enrollment.
Thank you, Andy. And to add on to that, just as a reminder, if I remember correctly, Andy, it does not include the summer term even in the future, correct?
That's right, and included in the announcement from the governor is encouraging the community colleges to leverage some of their HERE student aid funds to help cover any unmet need over the summers, so that students can accelerate their learning throughout completion.
Okay, thank you, Andy. And then, however, there is one option for summer 21, and that is many of the high school students do not graduate until after the start of the community college summer term, which means that they would still be eligible for CCP coursework.
That's
Which
great.
is
That
free
was
of charge to our high school students.
Yes.
Free of tuition. Sorry, free tuition.
that was another question that came up on the chat line. And then further to that, are students still eligible if they begin classes in the spring of 2022?
As of now, the focus is on fall 2021. And so if there are students who are sort of on the fence on whether to start in the fall or maybe wanting to wait till the spring, we'd certainly encourage them to look to fall enrollment. Like Jeff mentioned before, depending on, because this is a brand new program and there are a lot of unknowns, we are certainly open to including first-time spring enrollment should there be availability of funds at that point.
What about students that might have already received a financial aid award from the community college? Will they receive an updated notice if eligible for the grant?
Yes, that is correct. And so we're hoping that we'll have the technology in place over the next several weeks, and hopefully by the 1st of July, around the Independence holidays, that financial aid offices would be able to run the technology they need to then apply the Longleaf Commitment Grant to any eligible student. Even if they've already applied, they've already registered, they've already done FAFSA, received other Pell and scholarship awards. Once the financial aid office runs that process, it will then give them the Longleaf Commitment Grant if they are eligible.
And to piggyback on what JW said earlier, I think that's big kudos to our State Education Assistance Authority for making that so easy for our students, that there's not a new application for this program. If you've already completed the FAFSA and you've already applied to community college, you are eligible. So again, hats off and kudos to them for this great work.
We have a lot of questions that are just clarifying some original, answers. One is to clarify, is this grant available for 2 years until the spring semester of 2022? So we see a lot of heads nodding. So that is a yes. And then we've got folks that are just wanting to really dig a little bit better understanding. And if you wouldn't mind repeating what the supports might be for DACA students. What do they have access to?
So just to clarify on the timing, so that the aid will be available for the full 2021-2022 academic year and the 2022-2023 academic year. So, you know, so that is something important to note as well. If students are enrolled part-time, that the funding at some point will stop, and that's because the gear funding, the original federal funding source for this program expires in 2023. So students will be able to participate in this program through the end of the spring 2023 semester. Hopefully we have a whole lot of folks who have finished up their degrees and eligible diplomas. But if there are students who are still you know, partway through the program, that's when this particular aid source would, at least currently, would end. I think on the, and again, JW or Jeff jump in on this, on the question for resources for DACA students. I think we are reviewing what options may exist. Part of the limitation is that on the back end of how this program is, that the grant itself is running, is that it is sort of an additional part of the community college grant. So it currently carries the same restrictions as the community college grant as a result. So as we're looking at what options there would be legally and making sure we're not breaking any state policies by potentially expanding it, that's what we're looking at, and so that if there are updates, we'll certainly make sure folks are aware on the DACA side, as well as other, you know, immigration statuses that would fall under the CC grant.
And so I think the only piece of information that I would add is that many of our community colleges do their best to work with students with immigration statuses that make them ineligible for either the Pell Grant or the community college grant. And there's a variety of scholarships that might be available out there, and all of those would still stay in place. And so I would encourage that the student and the parents and the counselor who's helping maybe advocate for the student just work directly with that local community college.
Great, we have some FAFSA questions. Does submit the FAFSA include completing any required verification processes?
Yes, so you have to complete the FAFSA, and if you happen to be selected for verification, or if there's any documentation that's needed, before anything can be awarded, that entire financial aid process has to be completed.
Will there be any FAFSA or community college deadline extensions for students to apply and to take advantage of this program?
Most community colleges do not have a financial aid deadline as a pure deadline is thought of. Most colleges will have maybe a date that, in order for everything to be processed before classes start, you need to get your FAFSA in and your application in by that date. However, I believe that most community colleges, even after that date, will do their best to process your application and your FAFSA and award the monies as quickly as possible. Just realize that with a lot of our students, especially first generation students, they may not understand the enrollment process. Going into college is much different than registering and choosing your classes in your public education experience. So the sooner they start, the better, just to give that local college plenty of time to get all the processing done. However, if you even waited until the first day of classes or whenever their open registration period begins at that local college, they will do their best to get it processed in a timely manner. However, it's unlikely that they would have your Pell Grant and all your award available within 24 hours. That's just something that that's not reasonable to be able to process that quickly. So the sooner you can do it, the better.
the nuances and the amount of information that you all have in your heads right now. I think everybody wants to just take out and apply. Just a reminder, folks, that we will be using many of the questions that you are answering or asking today. We will be working to develop an FAQ that we will get out the door. I know Dr. Kelly and his team is very anxious to get a hold of all of these questions and begin to build some of those resources and tools for you all. So we are going to continue to spend up until 11 o'clock as many questions that we have. If we are not able to get to your question today, be rest assured we will be working to answer those on an FAQ. Another question that came up in regards to if a student receives another type of scholarship not associated with FAFSA, can they qualify for this grant?
I think that question falls to me. The answer is yes. We are considering the Longleaf Commitment grant as an entitlement. So that means that it'll be applied all the way up to the cost of attendance for that program of study at that institution. So that means that you will still get this money. There are, though, some local policies at each financial aid office at each college that might adjust some of those other scholarships because there are some federal regulations when it applies to cost of attendance that that institution will have to follow.
Great. An important question that has come up is, does this grant apply to students who are going to certification or diploma programs, or is it just for students who are on their associate's degree pathway?
Thank you. I think that question's for me again. Yes, if the certificate, if the curriculum, the college credit certificate, not the continuing education certificate. So if the college credit curriculum certificate was a mouthful, if that is Title IV eligible, or the curriculum diploma is Title IV eligible, then yes, they would be eligible for the Longleaf Commitment.
And to also highlight, if students are going into a continuing ed program, the government provided funding for short-term workforce assistance, tuition aid as a grant for those programs. That was part of the first year package. So there is aid available for those programs. It's just outside of the scope of the Longleaf Commitment program specifically.
And I believe, Andy and JW, those grants are actually awarded by the community college themselves. So that would be something that the community college would grant students who are pursuing those short-term workforce credentials.
This question might need some context, but I believe you all will be able to answer it. The 2,800 is based on AGI from the FAFSA, correct?
It's based on EFC on the FAFSA, not on the AGI. We were trying to give a little more meaning to this ambiguous EFC concept. But of course, the EFC is determined after completion of the FAFSA and the determination of that whole process. However, we know that EFC to most people outside of financial aid can be confusing. So we tried to give a little bit of context around that. So if you're wanting to drill down into details, it's better to focus on the EFC. If you're trying to kind of give some context of what that EFC means, then the AGI just kind of helps give some meaning to that EFC. I don't know if Jeff or Andy want to add to that any.
I think you summed it up well. I think to your point, JW, the comparison with AGI is to help families see that this is something that they may be eligible for even before they apply for the FAFSA, because most people sort of understand what their family income is. And I believe that federal financial aid in coming years is moving to AGI. We're not there yet, but obviously it's part of that communication around that you know better what your family income is, and that you as a student may be eligible for this even before you complete the FAFSA. And obviously, as many of you know, given the work you're doing on the FAFSA, that FAFSA helps students to realize everything that they're eligible for that they might not have realized in before that.
More questions around eligibility. What about students who graduate from a non-traditional high school?
So non-traditional high school may need some clarification. If it's I think any public, private, or homeschool is eligible. So if it's a non-traditional high school, I guess within any of those systems that would be eligible. But if the participant could provide a little more clarification about what they mean by non-traditional high school, that would be helpful.
They gave an example of Penn Foster High School. So I will look that up.
That is one I'm not familiar with.
So we will clarify on the back end when we take a look at all the questions that have come in. Can you share any more information about the Longleaf Reconnect Complete for adult learners? There's a lot of questions around adult learners, or perhaps even those that have graduated 2 and 3 years ago that might want to take advantage of an opportunity like this.
Yeah, I'll jump in and Jeff, fill in any gaps that I leave. So it's Longleaf Complete. I apologize that the Reconnect moniker is a little outdated now. So that was I'd include that on the chart. So I apologize for any confusion there. So it's Longleaf Complete, and part of the reason why it's called Longleaf Complete is that we want to help students who are close to completion, but due to the pandemic have stopped out or are currently enrolled in or at risk of stopping out due to the pandemic. The aid itself is provided as flexible grants to our education systems. So the community college system, UNC, as well as our independent colleges and universities. And we're not requiring that it all be used as student aid. In fact, it may also be used for improving student supports, such as success coaching and outreach to students to help them re-enroll. So we wanted to provide the sort of intentionality of having a goal of helping near completers who have been impacted by the pandemic with some flexible aid that has suggestions for how to use it, but recognizing that each institution is going to have sort of a different set of tools at their disposal based on how they've used existing federal aid, depending on what institutional resources already exist to help those students come back and finish or surmount whatever the challenges are with their current enrollment to finish their programs.
There are so many questions on here, and I'm trying to get to them. One of the things, just from a marketing standpoint and communications, is will there be any materials in Spanish? And the follow-up question to that is that we recognize that we are entering an exciting time of graduation for many of our high school students, and folks wondered if there will be any additional, whether it's a press release or other kinds of media outreach or materials that can be shared to help support in those graduation materials.
As we spoke earlier, we are partnering with a vendor that will help us develop. We don't have the expertise or the staff to do such a marketing campaign. So we're looking right now for that marketing piece that will provide the social media type of things, and we'll try to do our best to do different blitzes throughout the summer is what I would expect of those different marketing campaigns. I know that many graduation ceremonies are probably next week or this week, and so it's probably unlikely we get anything out to you prior to your graduation.
Will this cover course fees that cover materials?
Yes, the $2,800 figure is so just using the maximum award as the example. So that the $2,800 doesn't adjust based on this campus's fees are a little bit lower, or this campus has waived their fees for the semester. The $2,800 is a flat amount which the students can apply to whatever fees and course expenses that they'd be able to ordinarily apply their student aid toward. And JW might be able to provide more specificity if there's more nuance in the different types of fees, but that's the intent is that whatever aid is provided over tuition would be provided to cover the fees.
So typically, I could see where that money hits the student's account at the college, and maybe they have a little bit of money left over that could be applied to their book expenses, for example. Or let's suppose they're in an automotive program purchasing tools. So that any expense that can legitimately hit that student account at that college, then this money can assist in paying for it.
I think we've got a comment here before we go to our last few questions, just clarifying some of the grant deadlines and whatnot. But we've got one individual that says, thank you for naming this the Longleaf Commitment and not another promise program. But diving right into that, is this a one-time grant? You mentioned that 2021 students are eligible for the program until 2023. Does that mean until the $2,800 runs out, or is the $2,800 for each year until 2023?
That's a great question, Chris. And it is $2,800 for the next 2 years for these students. So $2,800 for the 21-22 and $2,800 for the 22-23. And because this is federal one-time funds, as the program is designed right now, it's only for this graduating class of high school seniors, the class of 2021, and then the money will run out. However, the governor has proposed, and this is a proposal, not a program yet, has proposed in conjunction with the UNC system and the community college system, what we're calling the North Carolina Guarantee Program, which would actually leverage the state share of the state fiscal recovery funds from the American Recovery Act, the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, to actually provide a guaranteed $6,000 to families with an income of $60,000 or less to go to any UNC system school or North Carolina Community College school. So the goal is that this is the governor's sort of first investment in this longer term idea of a guarantee. We know that it's much easier for families to plan and to figure out if they can afford to go to college, if they have a sense of what's actually going to be available. And so this Longleaf Commitment is designed to be for this year's high school graduates, but the governor, the UNC system, and the community college system have proposed leveraging other federal funds for a bigger guarantee program that we hope will be a model of something that the state can do moving forward.
Great. 2 more questions and then we'll wrap up. Is there any overlap conflicts with the finish line grant eligibility should any emergencies arise?
The only thing that I can think of is that cost of attendance requirement that financial aid offices and the colleges had to follow as part of the Title IV regulations. And so there could be some sort of adjustment or cap that would have to be made on the finish line grant. But the Longleaf Commitment grant is an entitlement. And so it would kind of get priority as far as being applied to that cost of attendance.
Great. And then the final question as we wrap up is that, can you all share any more information about the matching grant for community colleges to be able to hire success coaches, advisors? How will these grants be determined?
Andy, you want to go first?
I'll just very briefly say, so this will be determined, specific formulas and all of that will be determined by the system office and the state board. But the hope is to develop an equitable formula, perhaps having sort of a base amount for all institutions, or some other mechanism to make sure that the aid gets out equitably and is meaningful for institutions that need that extra booster to really expand their student support operation. But I think that the details on that will be determined by the system.
Thank you, Andy. And the only thing I can add is that the team has been identified and is working on what that formula would look like.
Great. Before I toss it back over to Jeff, I just wanted to thank you all for joining us today. Many of you have asked if there will be any resources coming out of this. We will be shortly tomorrow morning sending out a recording, the presentation, the fact sheets, and then I believe Dr. Kelly and his team will be taking many of the questions that came up today on both our chat line and our Q&A line, and we'll be working to create an overall fact sheet Q&A that can be supportive in your additional outreach and engagement efforts with our students and families. Jeff, I'm going to go ahead and have you close out.
Great, and I just want to thank you again, Chris and Melissa and the My Future NC team for hosting this today and for quickly working with us to pull this together. And thank you to all the participants for joining today. It's very exciting that we get to share this. And of course, a special thank you to Andy, my colleague in the Pandemic Recovery Office, for all his work on this, and to Dr. Kelly for his partnership on this effort. I think great partners make great programs, and I think this is a great example of that. The last thing I'll share, and I think this was a question that Chris had shared from earlier emails, is this program is live. It is ready to go, and the money will be there. So I hope you will shout it from the rooftops to every student and family member you can find. You can start talking about it. You can start sharing about it. And we really hope that you can help us get the information out to our recent high school graduates about this opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Have a great day.